Whenever you sit down for a job interview, usually people don't just look at your resume and say you're hired. They do the actual interview and they check your references. And it's funny how fast a myth can turn into a mandate, isn't it? Because for over a decade, Mark Carney has been worshipped by the Canadian establishment, gushed over by international media, and now handed the keys to the country by voters who never really took a look past his resume and at the wreckage that this man has left behind him. But here's the truth. Mark Carney didn't just walk into the Prime Minister's office with a clean slate. He walked in dragging a decades long record of economic missteps, inflated promises, corporate cozying, and damage control dressed up as visionary leadership. The mainstream media has been absolutely obsessed with painting Mark Carney as the calm, brilliant, technocratic businessman, the rock star central banker, they say. But what if I told you that this rock star leaves a trail of busted instruments and unpaid tabs wherever he goes? If you think this is just another smart guy who saved Canada from the 2008 crash, think again. Because the evidence, if you actually are willing to look at it, tells a very different story. Let's go through it step by painful step. Let's go.
Welcome to Bakes on Things.
Welcome back to Bakes on Things. I'm Chris Baker. Please like, subscribe, and comment. I want to hear what you think about all of this. And we're going to start with Mark Carney not rising up from public service. Instead, he came straight out of Wall Street, more specifically Goldman Sachs. And that's not a red flag. That's a giant crimson billboard, and I'll tell you why. At Goldman, Carney worked on major financial deals, including advisory work with the Russian government in the late 1990s. Sounds harmless enough until you realize that Goldman Sachs was reportedly betting against Russian debt at the exact same time that they were advisors to Russia. Let that sink in, advising a country while profiting off its collapse. And guess who was in the room? Mark Carney. Was it illegal? No. But was it ethical? Absolutely not. That's the Carney style. Operate within the system's boundaries, even if the public gets burned in the process. It's not leadership, it's financial opportunism, and it set the tone for everything that followed. Mark Carney setting up against a country he's working for. Very interesting. And Carney was then crowned governor of the Bank of Canada in 2008, just as the global financial crisis erupted. The press went wild, praising him for saving Canada, even though it was Jim Flaherty. But did he actually save us or just delay the pain? Under Carney's leadership as the Bank of Canada, he slashed interest rates to record lows and kept them there. Sure, that prevented a crash in the short term, but here's what else it did. It ignited a housing price explosion that we're still paying for today, and it pushed household debt to record levels. It made young Canadians believe home ownership was becoming more of a pipe dream, and now that's all it really is. Unless, of course, they were born rich. He knew what was happening. He even warned eventually about very firm valuations in the housing market, but by then, the fire was already out of control. Carney's low-rate policies fueled a real estate frenzy and made Canadians debt slaves in their own country. He kick-started the crisis of affordability that we're still choking on right now. And let's not forget the optics disaster when Carney took a personal vacation at the home of Liberal MP Scott Bryson. At that time, just as the Liberals were recruiting him for party leadership then, he called it innocent. Canadians called it suspect, but we've forgotten. Because it was suspect. He was the governor of Bank of Canada who should never have cozy ties with partisan politicians. But he did. He's always a step too close to power. And he's always looking for more power. And at that time, they were even recruiting him to Liberal leadership then. This has been in the works for years, folks. And take a look at this headline from the National Post. Why is it messed up like this? This was a headline explaining this meeting. Was this messed up for the election? Did they want no one in Canada to find this article, so they buggered up the headline? People need to answer this question from the National Post. If you want to see for yourself, click the link in the pinned comment. And while still at the Bank of Canada, Carney was also chair of the Financial Stability Board, the G20's top global banking watchdog. And here's where the mask really started to slip off for Mark. Carney pushed hard for tougher global banking regulations after that 2008 crash. Sounds great on paper, but what did that actually mean? Higher capital requirements that made it harder for banks to lend, suffocating compliance that choked small and mid sized institutions right out, a regulatory maze that helped entrench the power of the very mega banks that caused the crisis in the first place. At a closed door meeting in 2011, JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon lost it on Carney. Not because he hates rules, but because Carney's reforms were so extreme they risked crashing credit markets globally. And it wasn't just bankers complaining. Several financial experts warned that Carney's overregulation could stunt economic recovery and make banks too conservative to take necessary risks at the time. And guess what? That's exactly what happened. Credit slowed to a crawl, growth flatlined, and small business owners paid the absolute price. Carney wasn't reforming finance. He was regulating it into paralysis, and he was destroying small institutions around the world in the process. In 2013, Mark Carney was parachuted into the UK as governor of the Bank of England, the first foreigner in that role ever. I bet they won't do that again. The British press fawned over him, but by the end of his tenure, Carney had earned a very different nickname, the unreliable boyfriend. That's because his biggest idea, forward guidance, was a complete disaster. He promised interest rates wouldn't rise until unemployment dropped below 7%. But when that happened way faster than he ever expected, he had to abandon the policy entirely within months. Markets were confused, consumers were completely misled, and confidence in the Bank of England took a massive hit. But that wasn't his only mess in the UK. During the Brexit referendum, Carney inserted himself into the political fight with doom and gloom forecasts. He called for recession, job losses, collapsing housing markets. And guess what? None of it happened. Brexiteers accused him of running a fear campaign. Even his predecessor, Lord Mervyn King, called him out for turning the bank into a political player. Boy, does that sound familiar. Fear campaigns? Not Mark. And while Carney was fear-mongering about Brexit, he was missing something massive: rising inflation. By 2017, UK inflation hit 3%. That helped stock markets. It helped real estate. It helped the rich. But for ordinary people, it meant falling purchasing power and rising costs of living. Even Prime Minister Theresa May had had enough. She publicly called out Carney's Bank of England for hurting ordinary working people, with policies that inflated wealth for the top 1% while leaving everyone else in the UK behind. Who does that and where does that sound like? After leaving the Bank of England, Carney reinvented himself again, this time as a climate crusader. He was appointed UN Special Envoy for Climate Action and Finance and helped launch the GFANZ fiasco, supposedly to steer global finance toward a net zero outcome. But it didn't take long for the cracks to show like an earthquake. Carney claimed that his new employer, Brookfield Asset Management, was net zero. That sounds amazing until you realize that Brookfield owns massive fossil fuel infrastructure, coal ports, oil pipelines, natural gas terminals, even today. Climate experts immediately called it out as pure greenwashing. Carney had to walk it all back. He admitted he misspoke, but by then the damage was irreparably done. His credibility took a massive hit, and GFANZ, it's a joke. The world's biggest banks joined it and continued to fund coal, oil, and gas expansion without consequence. There were no penalties, no enforcement, no deadlines, just PR spin and hollow pledges. Climate groups begged Carney to take a harder line. He didn't, because GFANZ was never about change or radical change. It was about giving financial elites a new mask to wear, the mask of climate responsibility, while continuing business as usual. Let's be honest, Carney isn't a climate warrior. He's a finance guy selling a softer image. And here's the thing, folks. We could have seen all of what's going on coming. He even invests, as Moose on the Loose pointed out, in mostly American companies. Let's strip away all this branding then. Who is Mark Carney? Well, he's a Goldman Sachs banker who helped advise Russia while his firm bet against Russia. He's the architect of Canada's debt fueled housing crisis. He's the regulator who overreached so badly that the world's largest banks warned of economic sabotage. He's the central banker who turned communication into confusion and turned political neutrality into political theater. And he's the climate envoy who claimed net zero while backing fossil finance. Yet somehow this man was painted as Canada's economic savior. Mainstream media has done everything to sanitize this record, by the way. But Canadians, you deserve better. You deserve the truth. And now that he's prime minister, we deserve to be vigilant every single day because this man is not here to serve our country and he's not here to serve your family. He's here to serve the global financial agenda that he's always served throughout his career. Nothing has changed. He is selling us out, and the trade negotiations are a prime example of it. So here are 10 things Canadians must keep their eyes on under a Mark Carney government. First, we must watch for more vague economic plans with no budgets or cost structures. They're his specialty, and he keeps doing it. We need to watch for increased inflation beyond what we have today. It was a blind spot under his leadership in the UK, and it could be again. We need to watch for rising household debt. Carney has a history of enabling cheap credit with long-term pain, and our household debt's already some of the worst in the world. We need to watch for massive green spending promises with little accountability, especially with global finance partners. Watch for private sector entanglements like Brookfield. Carney has never truly cut ties with any of these institutions, and he'll find a way to make sure he's connected to them still. We need to watch for housing affordability promises. He helped break the system, and now he has no real solution to fix it. We need to watch for policies that benefit big banks first, and that's where his loyalty has always been. We need to watch for technocratic overreach. Carney has a record of ignoring elected bodies and acting like a World Economic CEO. He does that with Parliament now, making decisions for himself and only himself. Watch for climate policies heavy on branding, light on substance. GFANS was a masterclass in hollow commitments. And finally, watch the media, because they will keep propping him up unless we push back with facts. And he knows exactly how to manipulate them by financing them. Mark Carney is not our savior. He's not a visionary. He's a manufactured product of global finance with a trail of policy failures and elite spin the length of the Highway 401. Don't be fooled by the polish on him. Look at the record. And if you care about the truth, about sovereignty, about your family's future, then don't just watch this video, share it, talk about it in the comments, push back, because if we let the myth go unchallenged, we're not just handing over our economy, we're handing over our democracy. Thanks for watching Bakes on Things. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and make sure you comment below so we can continue this conversation. And stay sharp, Canada. This is only getting bigger. We'll see you tomorrow.